thanks for joining me today, Anieke. Super happy and excited to chat about something that, interests me because I think we have a bit of a similarity in that we have family members that we're very close to, very far away. And
Definitely.
now with sort of all the tools we have to sort of connect, we still see it still seems to be not very intuitive and not very engaging. I want to talk about Peekabond and what you're building,
Yeah,
but talk about sort of the catalyst. It seems like I said, we sort of have something similar where you have a niece in Australia and
that's right.
you're here in Amsterdam. I'm here in Amsterdam, and my nephew is in New Orleans. So
Yeah.
both very, very far away, halfway around the world from really members that we love in our family. So I guess talk about the situation and I guess how that inspired you to build Peak Bond.
Yeah, thanks. So I think the catalyst is definitely my little niece who was born about 2.5 years ago. I had this idea for quite a while that bonding with someone at a distance is difficult because my sister was living in
Right.
Australia for quite a while. But as adults, we can, of course, video call like we're doing now. But when I met her for the first time, that was actually in Amsterdam, the airport at Schiphol. And
Mm-hmm.
my sister had her for 6 weeks. She had come all the way from Australia by herself with her six
Wow.
week old baby, arrived at the airport and was like, oh, I'm done with this flight, please hold her for me. And I never had anything like with babies until I held her baby for the first time. It was just
Yeah.
undescribable feeling. The time stood still and I was like, holy shit, this is so special. I didn't know what was happening, and all I could think was, my life doesn't matter. What I want is for her to be a happy, loved, safe human being, and I want to do everything in my power to make her feel my love and enable her in her development. But of course, 2 weeks later, my sister went back on the plane to
Right.
Australia. We kept in touch, like with WhatsApp calling and everything. But I just felt like, okay, there's no way I can build a deeper bond having interactions like these. So I started looking online and I saw that there were no solutions out there available that really cater to our needs. Like there are some online reading apps, but yeah, I'm not reading online for a baby, right? And also, reading is pretty static. Like you're sitting down in the same spot, you have to be live at the same time. And I just thought, okay, no, I think it should be different. And I didn't find it, so I decided, okay, you know what? I'm going to create it myself. I had kind of like the dream to have my own company for quite a while. My background is in venture capital, so I worked for about 8 years for different investment vehicles, and I saw hundreds of startups passing by my desk, and always like had the feeling, would I want to work here? Would I want to work here? No, 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 no. Never had that one thing that I thought, okay, this is good enough for me, until this personal passion started boiling, I guess, since the start of the COVID crisis, where I saw a huge opportunity, not just through the pandemic, where families are not even able to visit each other, but also the fact that families are getting more global, and I just saw a huge momentum there. So I thought, okay, this is the moment. I was back then about 30 years old, and I was like, okay, if I'm ever going to do it, it's now. Like, the longer you wait with being an entrepreneur, the more difficult it gets, I guess. So I just went for it. And yeah, fast forward now, we have the app in the App Store. It's been downloaded in 28 countries. Users are super excited about it.
When you first started to look at it, right? Because you can make there's so many game apps, right? There's so many sort of it's probably like sort of family apps, but based around sort of gamification where everybody can like I played some on a couple apps where you could play like a board game like live with each other. But I think
Mm-hmm.
what sort of you've really done is taken the time to talk to scientists and talk to people in the space about what do grandparents need, right? What
Exactly.
do children need? What do parents want, right? There's all these different aspects more than just like having it sort of be a game, but psychologically what goes into it from, age, 2 to, age 8, and then a grandmother who is
Hmm.
70 across the world. Like, how can we make it not great just for kids, but also great for the
Oh,
adults and the
exactly.
elderly that's going to be using it? So I guess walk us through the first steps of case, like, hey, I want to do this. Like, who did you start to go and talk to, right? To say, hey, how can we make this app different? How can we make it engaging from a scientific level, from a psychological level? What were those processes like?
Yeah, great question. So when I started, I just started doing a lot of mom tests, pun intended. So I started to speak to a lot of moms, dads, grandparents, and experts as well. Over time, I think I've now spoken to over 300 families, and just really digging into their key pains, and also what they would like to gain from our app. And as it turns out from scientific research, 40% of children do not experience secure attachments, meaning like a safe where they can really explore and develop from. And also 70% of parents actually feel increasingly stressed since COVID. Like they had to balance
Right.
work, life, and also making sure that kids had those warm bonds with a broader social network. And then also 40% of grandparents regularly feel lonely. So I thought, hey, there's something in
Yeah.
these statistics, right? And we thought, okay, how can we solve this problem by creating something that helps those grandparents feel less lonely, whilst also helping build those social emotional bonds for young children and giving parents a little bit of time back in their lives, right? Because they're super busy, and the grandparents actually do have the time to spend time with their grandchildren. They just don't have the ability to, physically be present all the time. So that's how we started interviewing a lot of people, really narrowing down on what are we really trying to solve. And I guess what we've come down to is an app. We call it a digital playground for global families, where they can come together and receive science-based content suggestions, which are really based on child development science, like mapping out the entire child development journey and giving content suggestions that help children develop around specific milestones that they go through. And you can record videos in our app based on those games and suggestions that we give and send them what's called asynchronously. So you don't have to be live at the same time. You can record a video, send it to the child. We're now even building a feature where the response of the child is actually captured of the video that you send, and vice versa, right? The child can also send a video
Ah,
to the
yeah.
loved one at a distance, and that response can also be captured. So basically, the two value propositions that we saw our users needed most was the inspiration, because they don't really know how to be playful. I think that's
Yep.
also an important thing to mention, that a lot of grown-ups at some point in their life just forget how to be playful, and especially behind the screen, right? So the first value proposition is really like giving those content suggestions, and the second one is to save everything in our app for on one spot for the child, because people can share videos back and forth on WhatsApp as well, but
Yep.
it's all scattered around different
Yep.
WhatsApp groups, and there's
Yep.
not like one spot that's safe and secure for children. So yeah, we're building that.
And it gets lost in the stream of messages, right? When you go back and find something, there's not a way to like really have a folder structure to where you can save certain things from certain people and like your own folder set. So a big thing that I've noticed is like the time difference, right? And
Yeah.
it's like I really like want to call my nephew, all the time. Like just when something happens, I'm just like I want to call him, but I'm like, oh crap, it's 2:30 in the morning over there, right? Like it's just like,
Yeah,
damn.
not gonna happen. Yeah.
Yeah, not gonna happen. And so I think trying to create that connection in different sort of time zones around the world, to me, that's sort of a thing that I'm transitioning in dealing with. Like, what are some of the issues when you talk to those 300 families, right? Like, I guess what was some of
Mm.
their feedback and what was their pain points that they wanted to resolve?
Yeah, so definitely the time zone difference was mentioned a lot, but planning with children is difficult, period. Even if you have found a time that you're alive at the same time and you're calling, children are very much in the moment. They might not feel like it in that particular
Right.
moment. So they
Exactly.
might
Yeah.
just really be playing with a toy, and really don't feel like sitting behind the camera with family at a distance, which makes the family at a distance also, sometimes sad. Like, hey, I'm here, but she's not interested in me, right? Or he, for that matter. So planning with young children is difficult for any parent, like regardless of the time zone difference. I think the asynchronous solution that we've built really lowers the barrier for that, We also think that over time we might also enable asynchronous, but we had to start somewhere. And the reason is, when you send a video asynchronous, what you don't have is that response of the child, right? That really interactivity. So we're really trying to build something that's super interactive, but you don't have to be in the same spot at the same time, because that's where the key barriers are. So recording those responses, for example, is a way to make that interaction more possible. And we're also building other things, like built-in questions and ping pong effects that help families to really keep engaging with the app.
When you talk about the asynchronous part of it and you get their reaction, you mean like when they watch the video, you are able to watch it like 2 hours later or something. You wake up and they watched it. You can look at the phone, you can watch their reaction to your video, you're
Exactly.
saying? Okay.
Yeah, and we merge
Okay.
those two. So we'll also see what part of the video that you sent the child laughs about, right? It's not just the video of the child laughing, but it's the merged video. So we're actually building that right now. And the first responses are, yeah, very positive there.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. What about some of the other, I guess, features or whether it's, games is I think sort of the first level, right? The sort of
Right.
the ability to congregate that way. I guess what are you thinking about from that lens, and then some of the other stuff that has kind of been a little bit successful so far?
Yeah, so one of my co-founders has a PhD in gamification, so and also a master in child
Just
development
for those listeners
science.
out there, that does exist. PhDs in gamification, like that is a real deal
You're
thing.
basically just playing the whole time, right? No, it's a really it's a thing, and it's so important actually, because learning by playing is a really great technique, and somehow, like I said, we've lost touch with that, and we believe we want to bring that back to people's lives, not just children, but also adults. I think it will make their lives lighter and more happy as well, right? So one of the things that we're building as well is, because now when you log into the app, you get basically content cards served to you, but we want to build certain levels, like it's called scaffolding, that you start with level 1, level 2, level 3, almost like exactly like Super Mario is also built, right? With the very low barriers to entry, and as you dive deeper into the app, it becomes more engaging and more difficult as well. We also intend to build something like that, so something super light to start up the conversation, and ultimately, as you go along the path together, almost like a board game, you dive into deeper questions, right? When the children get a bit older, you can also start talking about family values, maybe emotions, like the tougher conversations that definitely people don't really tend to talk about when you're video calling with children, because it's just not something that
Right.
comes into mind
Yeah.
of most
Yeah.
people. So that's how we really want to change the world, basically, to use technology as a source for good, and to make it easier for people to build deeper, meaningful connections with children at a distance. So we see like a lot of other interesting features down the line, right? Having funny augmented reality filters, or drawing a funny face on grandpa, or reading stories in the app, or even have like user generated content. There are so many things that we can do with that,
Yep.
even
Yep.
increasing that network effect. But yeah, the challenge is always to keep it very simple and build out from there, right? As a startup.
You talked about your co-founder there for a second, the PhD in gamification. Was that when you sort of had,
I
the
feel
idea?
like you're jealous, like you wanted to
I'm a
have.
bit. I think that like it's such a, like, you think of, I think when you say that, like, you think of it differently. Like, you think video games, right? But
Mm,
now, I mean, almost every single app now, from finance apps to sports
mm,
apps to, they're all gamified, right? Whether
right.
good or bad, like
Yeah,
there's gamification to sort of everything.
exactly.
And so when you were creating this, when you first came up with this, did you go to her first, right? Were you talking about this with her already? I guess when I talk to founders, I always love having a co-founder is like so important, and like choosing
Yeah.
that person or even knowing that like it's
Yeah.
such an advantage to have a really great co-founder. So I guess
Oh
talk
yeah.
about that relationship and how did that happen?
Wholeheartedly agree. Like the team is really the most important thing. I think when you look at early stage startups, more so than the idea, it's really the team and how they execute. And I found out like the first half year, I was just tinkering and interviewing a lot of people and building stuff in no code platforms.
Yeah.
Really finding my way around a bit, but I quickly found out, okay, I'm not a technical person. I don't know anything about child development science. I need to have the right people around me.
Yeah.
I guess if there's one skill that I have is to find people who are better at stuff than I am and just grab him and get him on board. So my first co-founder was actually my co-founder Vincent, who is a product UX expert. And the first half year, it was actually the two of us interviewing a lot of people, like how can we make this solution in the best way possible to solve the problems that our users have
Yeah.
and who are our users, right? And then I guess last year around the August, I think my third co-founder Elia came along, and each of us we actually had a very different profile, and we did a pretty professional way of what's called now, I guess, co-founder dating. um, yeah.
That's great.
So really kind of like dating for a while before actually
Yeah.
getting married into the co-founder relationship. Because if you think about it, you're going to see your co-founder maybe more than your life partner. So might as well pick
Absolutely.
someone
Absolutely.
who you really work well together with. So
How long
yeah,
was that dating period? Real quick, like how long would you
so I
say that
think about
was?
3 months.
Okay.
Like I would say a minimum of 3 months is needed
Yeah.
before you really have your first fight or your first,
Just yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Totally.
stuff
No,
like that.
totally, totally.
Yeah,
Because then
so we
with three people, somebody's gonna get outvoted, right? Like you need to go through
exactly.
those things. Yeah.
So I actually recommend anyone who's in that phase to have a look at an article from First Round Capital. They made like 50 questions every
Mm,
co-founder should ask each other before getting on board with each other. And it has like these really tough questions about like, should one co-founder be able to fire another one? And what's a good exit? And do you ever want to exit? And like these really
right.
questions that you don't want to find out, I guess, later down the line that you're fundamentally not agreeing about certain core values. So that's a thing that we did. We did like value tests. We spent some really time with together offsite because Alia and Vincent actually already knew each other. Like from I guess 4 years ago, they met at a event for angel investors, and they became friends since. But Vincent and we didn't know each other, so I just met him through a mutual friend. So I know that a lot of investors, when they invest in founders, they consider long-term relationship or friends like a really good way to assess whether the team is a good fit. So we really had to how do you say, pressure cook, I guess, our
Yeah.
relationship. So yeah, we did that, and yeah, we're working really well together, also because we are so different.
When you talk about, so I want to hit on a couple of things here based off that, and one is funding, right? And there's a lot of different ways to go about building a product, starting a product. Have an idea, right? That's ideas are kind of everywhere. They come to us all the time, but
Hmm.
executing on your idea is something that I think people need to learn how to do. Like you said, like you were trying to play around with like certain tools, and you kind of like realize like, okay, this is maybe not what I'm good at executing at. I need to go get I'm good at going and finding the executors to do these specific things.
Correct.
So I guess when you were in that range of launching it, right, and you had sort of an investor network, were you at a stage where you wanted to go raise money for this, or do you say, hey, we're going to invest our own time and money into building the product, gets a little bit of validation before we go raise money?
Yeah, I think there's two things there. One, it really depends also on your personal financial runway, right? Some founders
Yeah.
have maybe exited a company before, they have the
Yeah.
cash to really bootstrap and build it. And I think if you can bootstrap, I would definitely recommend everyone to do that. Like keep your equity as long as possible. For me, I was in VC for 8 years, but I never
Yeah.
made it to the end of the fund, so I never got my carried interest. So yeah, I did have some savings, but not in a sense that you can say, okay, I have the luxury to bootstrap. So that's one thing. And then, of course, the second thing is the type of business that you have. So we have a social venture where it's really all about engagement before monetizing. So we
Hmm.
don't have like an e-commerce platform, for example, where
Right.
you can sell things like from day one. We really have to build the platform and get the user engagement before we can start implementing, like, for example, a subscription business model. So
Yep.
there's really a long runway, I guess, to monetization.
Yep.
And I did think about this like a lot because obviously being a VC, my default
Yeah.
option was almost like, oh, I know that role really well,
Yeah.
so I guess I should also be fundraising. But I did think that through very consciously because you do want to have the right investors on board that are value aligned and not just anyone with cash, right? So
Sure.
we're really looking for investors who understand in our understand our product and know that it takes a little while to build it and also to have monetization, I guess, and who maybe also interested in the remote bonding problem and
Right.
that we're building a social venture which is not just
Yep.
which is not going to be profitable next year, right?
Yep.
um, yeah, that's a pretty challenging game, I have to say, because in the Netherlands, investors are quite conservative. They always ask like, okay, so when are you going to break even? And they're not really used to ventures that, for example, don't have revenue right now, but plan to in the future. So. And there are not a lot of B2C investors either. So I'm almost
Yeah.
programmed to
Yeah.
start raising from impact investors or tech investors internationally. So yeah, that's also what I'm doing now, and it's an exciting journey. Yeah.
Well, that was my next question was like, B2C and when I talk to some founders and friends of mine who want to build like apps, right? It's like, okay, well, do you want to build a consumer app?
Hmm.
Because
Are you
you're
sure?
I was like, think about what you're saying, right? Is
Yeah.
that you know how many users you need to get to make a consumer app viable for, investors and to really monetize.
Hmm.
And how do
Gotta
you
think big.
it
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, well, your total addressable market might not be what you think it is for what you can get to, because to get to that, you're gonna have to spend money. Like, how are you gonna get these
Mm.
users? You can
Yeah.
build a really solid, good product, but it's like, okay, we have to get users to use your really good product, right? And not
Right.
just 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000.
But
You got to
millions,
think in the
maybe
millions.
billions.
You got to think in the
Yeah.
millions, right? And it's just
Exactly.
like, I'm like, you have to spend so much money to get that. So you have to raise a lot of money to get that. So I guess,
That's
how do
why.
you,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. No, 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 go ahead.
No. How do we do that? Yeah. So.
How do you look at growth? Because it's really, like you said, it's almost a network effect, which is powerful for families, I think,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which is really good. Because if you have a family, it's not necessarily one user, it's probably five or six,
Yeah, that's
right?
what we
So
see in our
that's really
app as
interesting.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things there. So it really helps that my background is in venture capital, so I know that game a bit, and I think I have an unfair advantage in that sense to have funded startups in the past that have similar propositions. So, for example, I've invested in a company called Schoola here in the Netherlands for primary school children to gamify to learn their primary school materials through gamification. And also through Rubio, my former impact fund, I invested in a company called Olio in the UK, and they're a food waste mitigation app where people who have food left over, they can donate it to anyone who's in hunger, I guess, and in need of food. And they basically also last year raised over 40 million in funding for scaling their company, whereas it's not even, well, they are monetizing, but they're definitely not like a huge
Yeah.
revenue generating business yet. And I've seen how they do it, and I've learned their tricks, and I know how the game works. So that it gives me, I guess, an unfair advantage to anyone else building a B2C app from scratch. And yeah, you're right. With respect to growth model, referral is definitely a key acquisition channel. So we already see that on average in our app, for each parent, they would invite maybe 4 or 5 other people in their little family circle to
Right.
connect with their child. And that's within families. But we also see that, our first, if you will, beachhead user is expat parents, and they are
Hmm.
very close knit communities of expat parents. Like they hang out with each other, and
Right.
um, it's a super interesting thing to see how they also recommend our product to other expat parents. And the same holds, I guess, for grandparents. You have to have a really clear strategy there. We have a very extensive go-to-market plan, and in short, what I can say, I can talk about this for an hour, but
Yeah,
just wanna.
yeah. How old is your niece now?
She's now 2.5, so she turns 3 in July.
Is she developing a Aussie accent at all? How does that
Oh
work?
yeah, she's
Yeah, yeah.
totally Aussie. Yeah, my sister as
Oh
well,
shoot.
actually.
Oh
Yeah,
really?
yeah, my sister also has a very Aussie accent.
So she has a Dutch Aussie accent?
Yeah, some people in Australia think she's local. Like she's really
Wow.
dig down to dig into the accent. Yeah. So
That's funny. So she could speak Dutch in an Aussie accent. Probably
yeah,
sounds
exactly. Yeah.
wild.
Yeah. Yeah. She even says ta, like a very Aussie way of saying thanks. So it's very cute. Like my sister would give her something and she would say ta. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just very cute.
So we'll kind of end a little bit on, the future. And I know it's so early on, right?
Mm.
But you've kind of already developed a lot of features, for the app. So,
Mm-hmm.
it when you sit down and with your co-founders and you talk about, the day-to-day stuff is different than I think, that 10-year sort of vision, right? And I think coming from your point of view, bootstrapping early on, building a product for, not taking, really early venture, you're building for a long term, right? You're looking at probably a decade long sort of, journey here, building this
Yeah.
out. So
Mm-hmm.
when you look out that long, I guess, what does success look like for you and the team?
Yeah, so we've clearly defined that for the next 4 years. So in 4 years, we'll have 4 million families on our platform. For next 10 years, I haven't mapped it out yet, like the number. But I think drill down to the core. It's really to help global families build bonds with young children at a distance, and that why, I guess, is really clear. The how and the what will also, be really dependent also on how the future developments will take place. For example, we see a lot of things happening in the metaverse and Web3 as well, but of course that's not accessible yet for grandparents. I don't see a grandparent wearing a VR glasses any day soon, but I that's something that we need to keep in mind, because it does give an opportunity, right? If you want to be together at a distance, that could be a very interesting development if it takes off. So we have to keep in mind the trends in the market, whilst also building something that people can actually use now. So yeah, I think we're just going to be the authority on helping global families build bonds across generations, time zones, and locations. And the way we do it is really going to be dependent on, what our users want and the market trends.
Wow. Well, I mean, it's the market is there because it's something I personally deal with, and I know that just being here, I've had two friends in the last 2 months have kids here, and their
Yeah,
families are not here, right?
exactly.
And so,
Have you
not
recommended Peekabond yet?
yeah, no, yeah.
Great.
And it's so you can start to really see, living abroad, you also see other populations and communities living abroad that have the sort of same issue, so you
Yeah,
can see how this sort of network effect can sort of happen quite quickly.
yeah,
And there is not another tool out there that does everything really well. Yeah.
definitely.
So best of luck to you and the team for the next decade to come. And thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, and stay playful. And yeah, also to anyone listening, because I know you have a very international audience. Yeah, we have an English app, and it's completely free. Looking forward to yeah, having anyone try it out, and always feel free to give me feedback. You can reach me on info@peekabond.com.
Yep,
Thanks,
and
everyone.
I'll put everything in the show notes, so we'll have everything in there that people can connect and check it out and ask questions if need be. So thank you so much.
Awesome, Grant. Great. Have a great day. Ciao, ciao.